I collapsed at work from sudden appendicitis complications. Rushed to emergency room, facing immediate surgery costing $23,000. Called parents desperately from hospital bed begging for financial help. Mother coldly refused, claiming they couldn't afford it after recent kitchen renovation. Father echoed her sentiment, suggesting I figure it out myself. Forced to drain entire savings account plus emergency credit cards. 3 months later, parents cheerfully announced they need $46,000 from me for Sister Emma's extravagant dream wedding. The audacity left me speechless. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I was always the forgotten middle child between my sister Emma and younger brother Tyler. Emma was the golden daughter who could do no wrong, while Tyler got attention as the baby of the family. My name is Jason, and I learned early that I had to work for everything I wanted. When Emma graduated high school, my parents David and Patricia didn't hesitate to pay her full tuition at a prestigious private college in Vermont. They covered her dorm fees, meal plans, spring break trips to Cancun, and even bought her a brand new Honda Civic for her 18th birthday. Meanwhile, when my turn came 2 years later, they sat me down at our kitchen table and explained that money was tight. I needed to find my own way through college, so I did what I had to do. I got a job with Murphy Construction Company swinging hammers and carrying lumber 40 hours a week, while taking night classes at the local community college. My hands were constantly covered in calluses. My back ached every morning, but I was determined to get my degree in business administration. It took me 6 years instead of 4, but I was proud of earning it myself. After graduation, I stayed with Murphy Construction because the pay was decent, and I genuinely enjoyed the work. There's something satisfying about building something solid with your own hands. I saved up enough to buy a small 2-bedroom condo in a working-class neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I was making my way in the world independent and self-sufficient. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other workday. We were framing a new house in West Hartford, and I was hauling 2x4s from the delivery truck. The pain hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. At first I thought maybe I'd pulled a muscle or eaten something bad for breakfast. But within minutes, the agony intensified to a level I'd never experienced. My supervisor, Joe Martinez, took one look at my face and knew something was seriously wrong. I was doubled over sweating despite the cool spring air and could barely speak through gritted teeth. Joe didn't waste time asking questions. He helped me into his pickup truck and drove straight to Hartford Hospital, running red lights and honking at slow traffic. The emergency room doctor examined me for less than 10 minutes before delivering the verdict: acute appendicitis with complications. My appendix was dangerously close to rupturing, and I needed immediate surgery. The surgeon explained that waiting even a few hours could result in life-threatening sepsis. They needed to operate within the next 60 minutes. That's when the financial reality hit me like a second wave of pain. The hospital's billing coordinator appeared with a clipboard full of forms and a grim expression. The surgery would cost $23,000 up front. My health insurance through the construction company would cover some of it, but my deductible was $8,000, and there were various procedures and medications not fully covered. I needed to pay approximately $23,000 before they could proceed. I had $15,000 in my savings account money I'd been carefully accumulating for the past 4 years. It wasn't much, but I'd been proud of having an emergency fund. This definitely qualified as an emergency, but I was still $8,000 short. Lying on that hospital bed, hooked up to IV lines and fighting waves of nausea, I called my parents. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cheerful and casual. When I explained the situation, her tone changed completely. $23,000, she repeated, as if I'd asked her to buy me a yacht. Jason, that's an enormous amount of money. We just finished renovating the kitchen, and those marble countertops cost us $18,000. We simply don't have that kind of cash lying around. I begged her to understand that this was a medical emergency, not a luxury purchase. The surgeon had emphasized that my condition was critical. But Patricia remained unmoved, her voice growing colder with each word. "Surely you can work something out with the hospital," she suggested. "Maybe a payment plan or something. You're 28 years old, Jason. You need to handle these situations yourself." When I asked to speak with my father, David came on the line and immediately sided with Patricia. He lectured me about the importance of having better health insurance and managing my finances more responsibly. According to him, this was a learning experience about being prepared for life's unexpected challenges. The irony was crushing. These were the same parents who'd spent thousands of dollars on Emma's sorority fees, her study abroad program in Italy, and her post-graduation celebration party. They'd never questioned those expenses or suggested payment plans. I hung up the phone feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The nurse came back asking for my payment information, and I handed over my debit card for the $15,000 savings account withdrawal, followed by my credit card for the remaining $8,000. Watching those numbers disappear from my accounts felt like watching my financial security evaporate. The surgery went smoothly, thank goodness, but the recovery period was brutal, both physically and financially. I couldn't work construction for 6 weeks, which meant no income during that time. The credit card interest started accumulating immediately, and I found myself calculating minimum payments and wondering how long it would take to climb out of this hole. 3 weeks after my surgery, while I was still taking pain medication and moving carefully around my apartment, I decided to check Facebook to distract myself from the financial stress. That's when I saw the photos that made my blood boil. My parents had posted dozens of pictures from their European vacation cruise. Patricia was posing on the deck of a luxury liner, wearing a new designer dress and holding a champagne glass. David was grinning beside her, both of them, looking relaxed and affluent. The photo captions talked about their much-needed getaway and celebrating life's beautiful moments. I scrolled through image after image of expensive shore excursions, fancy dinners, and luxury accommodations. Based on the cruise line and the suite they'd booked, I estimated their trip cost at least $35,000. This was the same week they'd told me they couldn't afford to help with my medical emergency. The betrayal cut deeper than the surgical incision. These people had watched me drain my life savings for emergency surgery, then jetted off on a European vacation that cost more than my entire medical bill. They'd prioritized their leisure cruise over their son's health crisis. I stared at those photos for hours, feeling a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief that gradually hardened into something colder. I was beginning to understand exactly who my parents really were, and it wasn't the loving family I'd tried to believe in for 28 years. 2 months passed while I focused on recovering and returning to work. The construction site welcomed me back with genuine concern and support that my own family hadn't shown. Joe Martinez had even organized a collection among the crew to help with my medical expenses, raising $800 that meant more to me than any gesture from my parents. I was getting back on my feet, financially making steady payments on the credit card debt while rebuilding my emergency fund from zero. The betrayal from my parents' cruise still stung, but I was learning to accept that I couldn't rely on them for anything meaningful. That's when Emma showed up at my apartment on a sunny Saturday afternoon in June, practically glowing with excitement. She burst through my front door without knocking, which had been her habit since childhood, and immediately started talking about the biggest news of her life. "Jason, you'll never guess what happened," she exclaimed, waving her left hand in front of my face. A massive diamond engagement ring caught the sunlight streaming through my living room window. Bradley proposed last weekend during our trip to Nantucket. Bradley Thornton was Emma's boyfriend of 2 years, a corporate lawyer from a prominent Boston family. His father owned a successful firm specializing in real estate law, and his mother came from old New England money. They lived in a sprawling colonial mansion in Brookline and belonged to the kind of country club where memberships were inherited rather than purchased. Emma had met Bradley at a charity gala that Patricia had somehow secured invitations to, probably hoping to network with wealthy families. The relationship had been a source of tremendous pride for our parents, who never missed an opportunity to mention their daughter's boyfriend from the Thornton family in casual conversation. "The wedding is going to be absolutely perfect." Emma continued settling onto my couch and pulling out her phone to show me Pinterest boards filled with inspiration photos. "We've already booked the oceanfront resort in Martha's Vineyard for next September. The ceremony will be right on the beach at sunset, with reception dinner under a custom-designed tent overlooking the harbor." She scrolled through images of elaborate floral arrangements, designer table settings, and professional photographs from other weddings at the same venue. Everything looked expensive and elegant, the kind of celebration featured in bridal magazines. "My dress is going to be custom-made by Sophia Chen in Boston," Emma explained, showing me sketches of an intricate gown with hand-sewn beadwork and a cathedral-length train. "It's $8,000, but Bradley's mother insists that a Thornton wedding deserves the finest details. She's already started planning the engagement party at their country club." I listened to Emma's enthusiasm while calculating the costs she was describing so casually. The venue rental alone was probably $20,000, and that was before catering, flowers, photography, music, and all the other wedding expenses that add up quickly. "Mom and Dad have been incredible," Emma continued. "They've already contributed $20,000 to get everything started. Dad opened a special wedding savings account, and they're treating this like the investment of a lifetime. They keep saying that marrying into the Thornton family is going to open doors for our whole family." The mention of my parents' $20,000 contribution made my jaw clench involuntarily. These were the same people who'd claimed they couldn't afford to help with my medical emergency just a few months earlier. Apparently, their financial situation had improved dramatically since my appendicitis. Emma noticed my expression and misinterpreted it as concern rather than anger. "Don't worry about the money, Jason. I know it sounds like a lot, but everyone's contributing. Bradley's parents are paying for the rehearsal dinner and honeymoon. Mom and Dad are handling the venue and photography. We just need family members to cover some of the smaller expenses." That's when she dropped the bombshell that made my stomach drop. "We need about $46,000 from family contributions for things like catering, flowers, music, and transportation," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan are giving $15,000. Cousin Michael is contributing $10,000. And since you're doing so well financially with your construction work, we figured you could handle the remaining $21,000. I stared at her speechless. Emma had just assumed that I would hand over $21,000 for her wedding without even asking first. The same amount of money I'd been forced to borrow for life-saving surgery was being treated as a casual family obligation for her party. "Emma," I said carefully, "I'm still paying off medical debt from my appendicitis surgery. I don't have $21,000 to spare for anyone's wedding." She waved her hand dismissively, as if my medical emergency was ancient history. "That was months ago, Jason. You're working full-time again and you've got that nice condo. Surely you can get a home equity loan or something. This is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration for your only sister." The entitlement in her voice was staggering. Emma genuinely believed that my financial resources existed primarily to support her dreams and goals. The possibility that I might have my own financial priorities hadn't occurred to her. "Besides," she continued, "family should make sacrifices for important milestones. When I have children someday, I'll remember who was there for me during the big moments. This wedding is going to establish Bradley and me in Boston society. The connections we make will benefit everyone in our family for years to come." I tried to explain that I was still recovering financially from unexpected medical expenses, but Emma's expression grew impatient. In her mind, my surgery was a minor inconvenience compared to her wedding preparations. "Maybe you could ask Mom and Dad for a loan," she suggested. They're so excited about this wedding, and they understand how important family support is during major life events. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Emma was suggesting I ask our parents for money to give to her for her wedding when those same parents had refused to help me during a medical emergency. As Emma continued describing wedding plans and casually mentioning additional expenses I might help cover, I realized this conversation was just beginning. She hadn't come to ask for my financial support. She'd come to inform me of my expected contribution. In her mind, the decision had already been made. That's when she revealed the detail that made my blood pressure spike dangerously. Oh, and Mom and Dad already spoke with Bradley's family about the photography and videography, Emma said casually. They wanted to make sure we had the absolute best documentation of the day, so they hired Platinum Memories Studios from New York. It's the same company that photographed the governor's daughter's wedding last year. My heart started racing as I sensed where this was heading. The package is $15,000 for the full day, with multiple photographers and videographers, plus all the editing and album creation. Emma explained. Mom and Dad told the Thorntons that you'd be covering that expense as your wedding gift to us. They've already put your name on the contract. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. They did what? Emma looked surprised by my reaction. They signed you up to pay for the wedding photography. I thought they would have told you already. It's such a generous gift, Jason. Bradley's parents were really impressed that our family was willing to invest in professional documentation. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what Emma had just told me. My parents had signed a $15,000 contract in my name without my knowledge or consent. They'd committed me to a massive expense for a wedding I hadn't even agreed to attend, let alone financially support. Emma, I said slowly, I never agreed to pay for your wedding photography. I can't afford $15,000 for anything right now, especially not for a party I'm not even involved in planning. Her face fell, and for the first time in our conversation, she looked genuinely concerned. But Mom and Dad already promised the Thorntons. The contract is signed and Platinum Memories has blocked out the date. If you back out now, it'll be humiliating for our whole family. The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. My parents had created a situation where refusing to pay would make me look like the villain who ruined Emma's wedding and embarrassed the family in front of the prestigious Thorntons. I was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about wedding expenses. This was about control manipulation and my parents' willingness to sacrifice my financial stability for their social ambitions. Emma left my apartment that afternoon with tears in her eyes and disappointment in her voice. She couldn't understand why her brother wasn't excited to contribute to the most important day of her life. In her world, family members existed to support her goals and dreams regardless of their own circumstances. But I was starting to see the bigger picture, and it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. The confrontation with my parents happened 3 days later, after I'd spent sleepless nights researching the legal implications of contracts signed without authorization. I drove to their house in my pickup truck, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I practiced what I was going to say. Their neighborhood had always intimidated me slightly. Every house was perfectly landscaped, with manicured lawns and luxury cars in circular driveways. My parents' colonial-style home fit right in with its fresh white paint-black shutters and the infamous marble countertops that had cost more than my medical emergency. Patricia answered the door wearing tennis clothes and diamond earrings, looking like she was heading to the country club. Her expression shifted when she saw my serious expression. "Jason, what a nice surprise," she said with forced cheerfulness. "I was just about to leave for my tennis lesson with the Waverly girls, but I suppose I have a few minutes." David appeared in the foyer, adjusting his golf shirt and checking his expensive watch. They both looked prosperous and relaxed, completely unburdened by financial stress. "We need to talk about Emma's wedding," I said without preamble. "Specifically about the $15,000 photography contract you signed in my name." Patricia's face immediately shifted into defensive mode. Oh, that. We assumed you'd want to contribute something meaningful to your sister's special day. The Thorntons are such an important family, and first impressions matter tremendously in their social circle. David nodded in agreement. Son, this is an investment in Emma's future, which means it's an investment in our entire family's reputation. When she's established in Boston society, the connections will benefit all of us. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. You signed a legal contract in my name without my permission. That's fraud and it's illegal. I never agreed to pay $15,000 for anything. Don't be so dramatic, Patricia said with an exasperated sigh. Family members help each other during important milestones. You have a steady job and that nice little condo. Surely you can get a second mortgage to cover wedding expenses. The suggestion was breathtaking in its audacity. They wanted me to mortgage my home to pay for Emma's party. I'm still paying off medical debt from my appendicitis surgery, I reminded them. The surgery you refused to help with because you claimed money was tight. David's expression hardened. That's completely different. Medical expenses are unpredictable and temporary. A wedding is a planned celebration that brings families together. You should have had better insurance coverage for medical emergencies. But you should definitely take out a loan for Emma's party, I asked incredulously. Patricia stepped closer, her voice taking on the manipulative tone I remembered from childhood arguments. Jason, your attitude is very disappointing. Emma has always been there for you, and now when she needs family support, you're being selfish and difficult. That's when she revealed something that made my blood run cold. Besides, we've already told the extended family about your generous contribution, Patricia continued. Uncle Robert called yesterday to praise your maturity and family loyalty. Aunt Susan is planning to mention your thoughtfulness in her Mother of the Bride speech. Cousin Michael said he's inspired by your willingness to prioritize Emma's happiness. They'd been spreading the narrative that I was enthusiastically funding major portions of the wedding, creating social pressure that would make me look terrible if I backed out. Family members who barely knew me were sending congratulatory messages about my generosity. David pulled out his phone and showed me a group text thread with extended family members. My name was mentioned multiple times as Emma's wonderful brother who was stepping up in a big way for the wedding. Relatives were praising my character and expressing excitement about the celebration. Everyone's so impressed with your maturity, David said. It would be very awkward to tell them you've changed your mind about supporting your sister. The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. They'd created a web of social expectations that made refusing to pay seem like betraying the entire family. Emma had apparently been busy as well. She'd been calling family members to thank them for their contributions, and she'd specifically mentioned my photography payment as an example of sibling love and support. Grandmother Margaret had already sent me a card praising my dedication to family values. "You're trapping me," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You committed me to expenses I can't afford, then told everyone I agreed to it voluntarily." Patricia's expression turned cold. "We're not trapping you, Jason. We're giving you an opportunity to be part of something important. Emma's wedding will be featured in the society pages, and the Thornton family connections could help your construction business for years to come." That's when David revealed the information that made me feel physically sick. "Actually, son, we've already taken care of the immediate financial concerns," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We've arranged a home equity loan against your condo to cover the photography expenses and a few other wedding necessities." My heart stopped. "You did what?" "We used the paperwork from your recovery period after surgery," Patricia explained matter-of-factly. "You signed several documents while you were on pain medication, including some financial authorization forms. We had them notarized and submitted to the bank." I felt like the ground was collapsing beneath me. "Those were medical documents and insurance forms. I never authorized any loans against my property." David shrugged, as if this was a minor technicality. "You were heavily medicated, and not thinking clearly about long-term financial planning. We were protecting your interests and Emma's future simultaneously." The room started spinning as I realized the full scope of their betrayal. While I was recovering from surgery, barely able to think clearly due to pain medication, my parents had somehow manipulated me into signing documents that gave them access to my property. "This is illegal," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You can't take loans against someone else's property without their explicit consent." Patricia's expression turned patronizing. "Jason, you're overreacting again. We're family. Family members look out for each other's interests, even when someone isn't capable of making sound decisions themselves." They'd convinced themselves that stealing from me was actually helping me. In their minds, contributing to Emma's wedding was such an obvious good that my consent wasn't necessary. Besides, David added, "the loan payments are very reasonable. Only $600 per month for 15 years. Your construction salary can easily handle that amount." $600 per month for 15 years. They'd committed me to paying over $100,000 in total for loans I'd never agreed to, all so Emma could have expensive wedding photography. "And it's not just photography," Patricia said brightly. "We also used the loan to cover Emma's dress, the floral arrangements, and the string quartet for the ceremony. Everything Emma deserves for her special day." The total loan amount was apparently $35,000 with interest that would double the repayment amount over 15 years. My parents had stolen my financial future to fund their daughter's party. I stood up from their leather couch, my legs shaky with adrenaline and fury. "I'm calling the police and my bank immediately. What you've done is fraud and theft." David's expression shifted to something darker. "Son, I'd think very carefully before making threats against your own family. Accusations like that can tear families apart permanently." "Emma's wedding is in 3 months," Patricia added. "If you cause problems now, you'll ruin the most important day of her life. Is that really what you want to be remembered for?" I walked toward their front door, my mind racing with legal options and financial implications. Behind me, I could hear Patricia's voice taking on a note of panic. "Jason, wait. Let's discuss this reasonably. Family should never involve outsiders in private matters." But I was already outside, pulling my phone from my pocket to call my bank and find out exactly what documents had been used to steal my home equity. The betrayal was complete, but the fight was just beginning. The next morning, I sat in the customer service center at Hartford Federal Bank, staring at photocopies of documents that made my stomach churn. The loan officer, a middle-aged woman named Carol Henderson, had been sympathetic but clear about the bank's position. "These appear to be legitimate signatures," she explained, pointing to several forms I barely remembered signing. "The notarization is valid, and the property verification checks out. From our perspective, this was a straightforward home equity loan application." I studied the signatures more closely. They were definitely mine, but written in the shaky handwriting of someone heavily medicated and barely conscious. I remembered signing various papers during my recovery, but I'd assumed they were insurance forms and medical documentation. The original applicant listed David and Patricia Reynolds as your financial advisors with power of attorney during medical recovery. Carol continued. That authorization allowed them to complete the loan process on your behalf. My parents had manipulated my post-surgical vulnerability to gain legal control over my finances. While I was struggling with pain medication and infection recovery, they'd been planning their theft of my property equity. "What are my options for disputing this loan?" I asked. Carol's expression grew uncomfortable. "That's really a legal question rather than a banking issue. You'd need to prove that the signatures were obtained under fraudulent circumstances, or that you were mentally incapacitated when you signed the authorization documents." She handed me a business card for a consumer protection attorney and wished me luck, but her tone suggested that challenging the loan would be an uphill battle. I drove straight to my lawyer Samuel Rodriguez's office, a small practice specializing in financial fraud cases. Samuel was a friend of grandmother Margaret, who'd helped her with estate planning issues, and she'd recommended him when I called her in desperation the night before. Samuel listened to my story with growing outrage, taking detailed notes and asking pointed questions about the timeline of events. When I finished explaining the situation, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "Your parents committed multiple felonies," he said bluntly. "Fraud, forgery, identity theft, and financial elder abuse if they've done this to other family members. The fact that they used your medical recovery period makes it even worse." "Can we get the loan canceled?" I asked hopefully. "We can try, but it'll be complicated. The bank acted in good faith based on apparently legitimate documents. We'll need to prove criminal fraud, which means police reports and potentially a lengthy court process." Samuel agreed to represent me, but warned that the legal battle could take months and would definitely destroy my relationship with my parents permanently. He also explained that I'd need to file police reports immediately to have any chance of criminal prosecution. That afternoon, I called Emma to give her a heads up about the legal action I was planning. She answered on the first ring, her voice bright with wedding excitement. "Jason, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the final head count with the caterer. We're up to 215 guests now, but the Thorntons insist that's reasonable for a proper celebration." "Emma, we need to talk about the wedding funding," I interrupted. "Mom and Dad took out illegal loans against my condo to pay for your expenses." Her tone shifted immediately. "What do you mean, illegal? They said you'd agreed to help with wedding costs." I explained the entire situation, the forged authorization, the stolen property equity, and my plans to file fraud charges against our parents. Emma's response was not what I'd expected. "Jason, you're being completely ridiculous," she said, her voice rising with frustration. "Mom and Dad were helping you make a smart financial decision during a difficult time. You were on heavy pain medication and not thinking clearly about long-term planning. They stole $35,000 from me," I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. "They invested in our family's future," Emma shot back. "My wedding is going to establish connections that will benefit all of us for decades. The Thornton family owns half of downtown Boston. When Bradley and I are established in society, we'll be able to help everyone." The conversation deteriorated quickly from there. Emma accused me of being jealous of her success and unwilling to make sacrifices for family. According to her, I was destroying her chance at happiness because of petty financial concerns. "Bradley's family is already questioning whether our family has the class and sophistication to fit into their social circle," Emma said through tears. "If you file criminal charges against Mom and Dad, it'll prove that we're exactly the kind of people they're worried about." She hung up on me after demanding that I think about someone other than myself for once in my life. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. This time it was David, and his voice carried a tone I'd never heard before. "Son, Emma tells me you're planning to involve the police in family financial matters," he said coldly. "I want you to understand very clearly that this would be a mistake with consequences you haven't considered." "What kind of consequences?" I asked. "The kind that affect your employment, your reputation in the community, and your relationship with every family member who matters," David replied. "Murphy Construction does a lot of work for companies where I have connections. It would be unfortunate if those relationships were damaged by false accusations against your father." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. David was suggesting that he could interfere with my construction job and damage my professional reputation if I pursued legal action. "Tyler starts college in the fall," David continued. "It would be terrible if family drama affected his scholarship opportunities or his relationship with his grandfather's education fund. Now he was threatening my younger brother's college funding. Tyler had worked incredibly hard to earn academic scholarships, and our grandfather had established a trust fund specifically for his education expenses. Emma's engagement announcement is scheduled to run in the Boston Globe Society section next month," David added. "The Thornton family has already invested significant time and money in wedding planning. If this celebration is disrupted by criminal allegations, the social embarrassment would follow Emma for the rest of her life. Each threat was carefully designed to make me feel responsible for collateral damage to innocent family members. David was using Tyler's education and Emma's social standing as weapons against my pursuit of justice. The conversation ended with David's final warning. "Some decisions can't be undone, son. Make sure you're prepared to live with all the consequences before you do something that tears this family apart permanently." That evening, Grandmother Margaret called me with news that changed everything. "Jason, dear, I need to tell you something important about your parents' financial situation," she said in her quiet but firm voice. "I've been keeping track of some troubling patterns, and I think you should know what I've discovered." Margaret was 82 years old, but sharp as a tack when it came to financial matters. She'd managed her late husband's successful accounting practice for decades and still handled her own investments with impressive skill. "Your parents have been far from truthful about their money problems," she continued. "I've seen their bank statements, and they're sitting on savings accounts totaling over $100,000. The European cruise was just one of several expensive vacations they've taken this year." This information contradicted everything my parents had told me about their financial limitations. "There's more, Jason. I suspect they've been taking money from Tyler's college fund and possibly from my own accounts. Some financial transactions haven't made sense lately, and I'm starting to wonder if your situation is just the beginning of a larger pattern." Grandmother Margaret had been documenting evidence of financial manipulation for months, waiting for the right moment to address the issue. My medical emergency and the wedding loan scheme had convinced her that intervention was necessary. "I've already contacted my attorney about protecting Tyler's education fund and my own estate," she said. "If your parents are willing to steal from you, they're probably willing to steal from anyone in the family." Her words hit me like a revelation. This wasn't just about my wedding photography debt or Emma's party expenses. My parents had apparently been systematically stealing from vulnerable family members, using medical emergencies and social manipulation to cover their tracks. "What should I do?" I asked. "You should file those police reports immediately," Margaret said firmly. "Not just for your own protection, but to protect Tyler and anyone else they might victimize in the future." For the first time since discovering the fraudulent loan, I felt like I had an ally who understood the real scope of my parents' behavior. But I also knew that the fight ahead would be brutal, and that Emma's wedding was about to become the center of a family war that would change everything permanently. Grandmother Margaret's house had always been my refuge during childhood family conflicts, and walking into her cozy living room felt like stepping into a safe harbor during a storm. She'd invited me over the following evening to share what she'd discovered about my parents' financial activities. Margaret had prepared for our meeting like a detective presenting evidence. Her dining room table was covered with organized stacks of bank statements, photocopied documents, and handwritten notes tracking suspicious transactions over the past 2 years. "Sit down, dear," she said, pouring tea into delicate china cups. "What I'm about to show you is going to be upsetting, but you need to understand the full scope of what your parents have been doing." The first stack of papers contained bank statements from an account I'd never known existed. My parents had been moving money through multiple accounts, apparently trying to hide their actual financial resources. "This is their primary savings account," Margaret explained, pointing to balance statements showing amounts between $95,000 and $120,000 over the past year. "These are not people struggling with financial hardship." She showed me credit card statements revealing frequent expensive purchases, designer clothing, jewelry, spa treatments, golf club memberships, and luxury restaurant bills totaling thousands of dollars each month. "The European cruise was just one of many extravagant expenses," Margaret continued. "They also took a wine country vacation in California, spent a week at a luxury resort in Florida, and made several shopping trips to New York City. Each vacation cost more than your medical emergency." The evidence was overwhelming and infuriating. While claiming they couldn't afford to help with my surgery, my parents had been living like wealthy retirees without financial concerns. But Margaret's next revelation was even more shocking. "They've been stealing from Tyler's college fund," she said, pulling out statements from an education savings account that should have contained over $40,000. The current balance is $12,000. The missing $28,000 was transferred to your parents' personal accounts over the past 6 months. My heart sank thinking about Tyler, who'd worked so hard academically and was counting on that fund to supplement his scholarships. He had no idea that his college money was being spent on his parents' luxury lifestyle. There's also evidence that they've been taking money from my accounts. Margaret added, her voice trembling slightly with anger. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, but recently larger withdrawals that I didn't authorize. She showed me bank records indicating unauthorized transfers totaling over $15,000 from her accounts to accounts controlled by my parents. Some transactions occurred on dates when Margaret was traveling or had been in the hospital for medical procedures. They've been using their access as my emergency contacts to steal from me gradually, she explained. I gave them limited account access years ago in case I became incapacitated, but they've been abusing that trust consistently. Margaret had been too embarrassed and confused to address the theft, directly hoping it was somehow a misunderstanding. But my situation had convinced her that my parents were serial financial predators, targeting vulnerable family members. I've been working with my attorney, Harold Fitzgerald, to document everything and protect my remaining assets, she said. Harold specializes in elder financial abuse cases, and he's seen these patterns before. She handed me Harold's business card and a folder containing photocopies of all the evidence she'd collected. The documentation was thorough and damning, showing clear patterns of deception, manipulation, and theft spanning multiple years and family members. Harold thinks you should meet with him immediately, Margaret continued, not just to address your situation, but to build a criminal case that protects Tyler and me from future victimization. That night, I called Samuel Rodriguez to share Margaret's evidence. He was astonished by the scope of financial crime the documents revealed. This changes everything, Samuel said. We're not just talking about one fraudulent loan. This is systematic financial abuse targeting multiple family members over several years. The prosecutors will be very interested in this pattern. He arranged a meeting with Harold Fitzgerald for the next morning and suggested that we should coordinate our legal strategies to build the strongest possible case. Meanwhile, Emma had been calling me repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemail messages about wedding preparations. The venue required final payment confirmation within 72 hours, and several vendors were demanding deposit payments that depended on my fraudulent loan funds. Jason, you have to call me back immediately, her latest message said. The florist is threatening to cancel our order, and the string quartet has another wedding interested in our date. If we lose these vendors, the entire wedding will be ruined. I finally returned her call, hoping to explain the seriousness of our parents' criminal behavior. Emma, you need to understand that Mom and Dad have been stealing money from multiple family members, I said. They've taken Tyler's college fund and thousands of dollars from grandmother Margaret. That's impossible, Emma replied immediately. Mom and Dad would never steal from family. You're making up stories to justify backing out of your wedding commitments. No matter how I explained the evidence Margaret had collected, Emma refused to believe that our parents were capable of systematic theft. You're destroying my wedding because you're jealous that I'm marrying into an important family, she accused. You can't stand that Bradley's family has money and connections that your construction job will never provide. The conversation ended with Emma threatening to tell Bradley's family that her brother was mentally unstable and making false accusations to avoid financial responsibilities. 2 hours later, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced, accompanied by Tyler, who looked confused and uncomfortable. David was carrying a briefcase and wearing the stern expression he'd used during serious childhood discipline sessions. Patricia's face was red with anger, and she started talking before they were fully through my front door. Jason, this nonsense has gone far enough, she said loudly. Tyler's college counselor called today asking about family stability issues that might affect his scholarship eligibility. Your threats and accusations are already damaging your brother's future. Tyler looked shocked and hurt. Jason, what's going on? Mom and Dad said you're trying to get them arrested for helping with Emma's wedding. David opened his briefcase and pulled out official-looking documents. "Son, we're here to give you one final opportunity to resolve this situation quietly and protect everyone's interests." The documents were legal papers apparently designed to formalize my loan obligations and prevent me from pursuing criminal charges. David wanted me to sign agreements acknowledging that I'd voluntarily authorized the wedding expenses, and that any disputes should be handled through family mediation rather than law enforcement. "If you sign these documents, we'll work out reasonable payment plans and keep this situation private," David explained. "If you don't, Emma's wedding will be canceled, Tyler's college plans will be disrupted, and this family will be destroyed permanently." Tyler's face was pale with worry. "Jason, please don't ruin my college plans. I've worked so hard for these scholarships." The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. My parents had brought Tyler to pressure me emotionally while threatening his education if I pursued justice. "You have 24 hours to decide," Patricia said coldly. "After that, we'll be forced to take steps to protect the rest of the family from your destructive behavior." As they left my apartment, David turned back with one final threat. "Remember, son, some decisions can't be undone. Make sure you're prepared to live with being the person who destroyed your sister's wedding and your brother's education." But that evening, everything changed when Bradley's family learned about the financial chaos surrounding Emma's wedding. "Emma called me in tears at 11 o'clock that night." Bradley's parents found out about the loan disputes and the family money problems. She sobbed. "They're threatening to call off the engagement unless the wedding funding is completely secured within 72 hours. The prestigious Thornton family apparently had no tolerance for financial instability or legal complications. They'd invested time and social capital in announcing the engagement, but they weren't willing to be associated with a family embroiled in fraud allegations. Bradley's trying to convince them to give us more time, but his mother is already talking about how this proves we're not suitable for their social circle." Emma continued through her tears. "Jason, if this engagement falls apart, my life will be over. Everyone in Boston society will know that the Thorntons rejected me." For the first time, Emma seemed to understand that the consequences of our parents' behavior extended far beyond my financial situation. "What do I need to do to fix this?" she asked desperately. "You need to face the truth about who Mom and Dad really are," I replied. "And you need to stop prioritizing a party over Tyler's college fund and Grandmother Margaret's retirement security." The next 72 hours would determine whether Emma would finally see our parents clearly, or whether she'd continue protecting the people who'd been stealing from everyone she claimed to love. I met with Harold Fitzgerald and Samuel Rodriguez the next morning in Harold's downtown law office, a professional space filled with legal books and framed certificates that immediately conveyed competence and experience. Harold was in his 60s with graying hair and the careful demeanor of someone who'd spent decades dealing with family financial crimes. "After reviewing Margaret's evidence and your loan documentation, I'm confident we have grounds for multiple criminal charges." Harold began spreading the evidence across his conference table. "Fraud, identity theft, forgery, financial abuse of vulnerable adults, and theft from a minor's education fund." Samuel nodded in agreement. "The pattern of behavior is clear and well documented. This isn't a family dispute about money. This is systematic criminal activity targeting multiple victims." Harold explained the process for filing police reports and seeking criminal prosecution. "We'll start with the local police department, but given the interstate implications and the amounts involved, this will likely involve federal authorities as well." "What about Emma's wedding timeline?" I asked. "She's under pressure from Bradley's family to resolve the financial issues within 72 hours. "That's actually helpful," Harold replied. "The time pressure will force everyone to make decisions quickly rather than allowing this situation to drag on indefinitely." We spent 2 hours preparing comprehensive police reports documenting each incident of fraud and theft. The evidence Margaret had collected was crucial for establishing the pattern of criminal behavior extending beyond just my situation. I want you to understand that filing these reports will trigger investigations that can't be stopped, Harold warned. Once we involve law enforcement, your parents will face serious criminal charges regardless of family pressure to drop the matter. What about the impact on Tyler and Emma? I asked. Samuel leaned forward seriously. Tyler's college fund is already gone stolen by your parents. Emma's wedding is funded with stolen money. These problems exist whether or not you file charges. The only question is whether your parents face consequences for their crimes or continue victimizing family members. At noon, I walked into the Hartford Police Department and filed formal criminal complaints against David and Patricia Reynolds for fraud identity theft and financial abuse. Detective Maria Santos took my statement and assured me that financial crimes involving elderly victims and stolen education funds received high priority from prosecutors. We'll begin the investigation immediately, Detective Santos explained. Given the amount of money involved and the vulnerability of some victims, we'll coordinate with the district attorney's office and probably the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Detective Santos had contacted my bank and initiated a fraud investigation that immediately froze all accounts connected to the disputed loan. My parents' access to the stolen funds was cut off within hours of my police report. Emma called me in complete panic at 4:30. "Jason, what did you do?" she screamed through the phone. "The wedding venue just called saying our payment was rejected. All the vendors are canceling contracts because the bank accounts are frozen." "I filed police reports for the crimes Mom and Dad committed," I replied calmly. "The stolen money is evidence in a criminal investigation now." "You've destroyed my wedding," Emma sobbed. "The Thorntons are going to cancel the engagement. My entire future is ruined because you couldn't handle family financial arrangements." "Emma, the money they used was stolen from Tyler's college fund and Grandmother Margaret's retirement accounts," I explained. "Your wedding was funded with money taken from family members who trusted them." But Emma wasn't ready to hear the truth yet. She hung up, promising to make me pay for destroying the most important day of her life. An hour later, David called with a level of fury I'd never heard in his voice. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," he said coldly. "Emma's wedding is canceled. Tyler's college plans are destroyed. Grandmother Margaret's accounts are frozen. You've hurt everyone in this family because of your selfishness." "I've protected everyone in this family from further theft," I corrected. "Tyler's money was already gone, and Margaret's accounts were being drained systematically." David's voice grew threatening. "You think you're so smart involving the police, but you have no idea what kind of trouble you've created for yourself. I have connections in this city that go back decades. Your construction job won't survive what's coming." "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "I'm promising you that actions have consequences," David replied before hanging up. Within the hour, my supervisor, Joe Martinez, called with disturbing news. "Jason, I just got a weird call from someone claiming to be a former client with concerns about your character and reliability," Joe said. "They suggested that hiring you might create liability issues for the company." David was following through on his threat to damage my employment, but Joe's next word surprised me. "I told them to go to hell," Joe continued. "I've worked with you for years, and I know exactly what kind of person you are. Anyone trying to sabotage your job behind your back is someone with their own agenda." Joe's loyalty meant more to me than I could express, but David's willingness to attack my livelihood showed how far he'd go to retaliate for my pursuit of justice. That evening, my parents arrived at my apartment again, but this time they brought Tyler and apparently planned to stage some kind of dramatic confrontation. Patricia was sobbing loudly before she reached my front door, and Tyler looked pale with confusion and worry. "Look what you've done to this family," Patricia wailed, gesturing dramatically. "Emma's life is ruined. Tyler can't afford college. Your own mother is having stress-related health problems." David appeared to be restraining Patricia as if she was on the verge of collapse, though her performance seemed calculated for maximum emotional impact. "Jason, please make this stop," Tyler pleaded. I don't understand what's happening, but everyone's saying I won't be able to go to college because of police investigations. Tyler, your college fund was stolen months ago, I explained gently. Mom and Dad spent your money on vacations and Emma's wedding expenses. The police investigation is trying to recover what's left. That's a lie, Patricia screamed. We were managing Tyler's education fund responsibly. You're making up stories to justify destroying your sister's wedding. David stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. Son, you've got exactly 24 hours to drop these charges and sign papers taking responsibility for the wedding loans. If you don't, this family is finished, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that you chose revenge over everyone's happiness. And if Tyler can't afford college, that blood is on your hands, Patricia added dramatically. They left after Tyler begged me one more time to fix whatever was wrong, so his college plans wouldn't be affected. Watching my younger brother's confusion and fear was the hardest part of this entire situation. But later that evening, everything changed when Bradley's family made their final decision about the engagement. Emma called me at 10 o'clock, crying so hard she could barely speak. It's over, she whispered. Bradley's parents called off the engagement. They said they can't be associated with a family under criminal investigation for financial fraud. Bradley tried to argue with them, but his trust fund depends on family approval, and they threatened to cut him off completely. The prestigious Thornton family had decided that Emma's family was too much of a social liability to risk their reputation and financial standing. They're already telling people in their social circle that the engagement was a mistake, and that they're relieved to have discovered our family's true character before the wedding. Emma continued through her tears. I'm sorry, Emma, I said, and I genuinely meant it. Despite her selfishness and manipulation, I knew that losing Bradley was devastating for her. No, you're not sorry, Emma said, her voice shifting from sadness to cold anger. You planned this. You wanted to destroy my relationship because you couldn't stand seeing me happy. But for the first time in our conversation, I heard something different in her voice. Beneath the anger and blame, Emma was starting to sound uncertain about the narrative she'd been telling herself. Jason, she said quietly, tell me honestly, did Mom and Dad really steal Tyler's college money? Yes, I replied simply. Grandmother Margaret has all the documentation. They've been stealing from multiple family members for over a year. Emma was silent for a long moment. I need to see that evidence, she finally said. For the first time since this crisis began, Emma sounded like she might be ready to face the truth about who our parents really were. 6 months later, I sat in Judge Patricia Hernandez's courtroom, watching my parents receive their sentences for multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and financial abuse. The legal process had been swift once federal investigators became involved, and the evidence Margaret had collected proved crucial for securing convictions. David received 18 months probation, 300 hours of community service, and court-ordered restitution payments totaling $68,000. Patricia got similar terms, though her community service was reduced due to claimed health issues that the prosecution viewed skeptically. The restitution covered not only my fraudulent loan, but also the money stolen from Tyler's education fund and grandmother Margaret's accounts. Federal oversight ensured that the payments would be made consistently with wage garnishment if my parents attempted to avoid their obligations. More importantly for our family's future, the court ordered mandatory family counseling and financial supervision that would prevent my parents from accessing other family members' accounts or financial information. Detective Maria Santos approached me after the sentencing hearing. Your decision to file reports saved other family members from ongoing victimization, she said. We found evidence that your parents were planning to take additional loans against Tyler's future earnings and had been researching ways to access your grandmother's estate assets. The criminal investigation had revealed the full scope of my parents' financial manipulation, including plans to exploit Tyler's college attendance and eventual employment to secure more fraudulent loans. Emma was waiting for me outside the courthouse, wearing a simple dress instead of the designer clothes that had been her uniform during the engagement period. The past 6 months had changed her dramatically. "How do you feel about the sentences?" she asked as we walked toward the parking area. "Relieved," I answered honestly. "Not because I wanted to see them punished, but because now we can move forward without worrying about who they'll steal from next." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I keep thinking about all the times they told me I deserved expensive things because I was special, while telling you that you needed to work for everything yourself. I thought that meant they loved me more, but now I realize they were just using different types of manipulation on both of us." The collapse of Emma's engagement had been devastating initially, but it had also forced her to examine our family dynamics with new clarity. She'd spent months in therapy working through the realization that our parents' treatment of her hadn't been love, but grooming for exploitation. "Bradley turned out to be a blessing in disguise," Emma continued. "When the Thorntons cut off contact, he showed his true character by immediately abandoning me instead of fighting for our relationship. I was so blinded by the social status that I didn't see how shallow the whole thing was." Emma had used the crisis as an opportunity for serious self-reflection. She'd moved into a modest apartment, taken a job at a non-profit organization, and started building a life based on her own values rather than our parents' social ambitions. Tyler walked up to join us wearing his college sweatshirt and looking healthy and confident. The recovery of his education fund, combined with his academic scholarships and a part-time job I'd helped him find, had allowed him to start his freshman year without financial stress. "How were finals?" I asked. "Challenging but good," Tyler replied with a grin. "My economics professor asked me to be a teaching assistant next semester because of my understanding of financial fraud case studies." Tyler had channeled his experience with our parents' crimes into academic motivation, majoring in accounting with a focus on financial ethics and fraud prevention. "He's also dating a really nice girl from his study group," Emma added teasingly. "Someone who likes him for his personality instead of his family's money." "Which is good since our family doesn't actually have any money," Tyler laughed. The three of us had grown closer during the legal proceedings, bonding over the shared experience of recognizing our parents' manipulation and working to build healthier relationships with each other. Grandmother Margaret joined us for dinner that evening at my apartment, bringing homemade apple pie and stories about her volunteer work at the senior center. "I'm teaching other elderly people how to recognize financial manipulation," she explained proudly. "The community center asked me to develop a workshop based on my experience with David and Patricia's schemes." Margaret had recovered both her stolen money and her confidence becoming an advocate for elder financial protection. The criminal case had given her a sense of purpose and connection with other seniors facing similar vulnerabilities. "I should have spoken up sooner when I noticed the suspicious transactions," Margaret reflected. "But I was embarrassed and confused, and I trusted them because they were family." "That's exactly why their behavior was so wrong," Emma said firmly. "They exploited your trust and your love for us." Emma's transformation had been the most dramatic of all of us. She'd gone from being our parents' willing accomplice in manipulation to being one of their harshest critics. 6 months after the court proceedings, I was able to refinance my condo and eliminate the fraudulent loan debt completely. The restitution payments from my parents, combined with improved credit from resolving the fraud issues, had restored my financial stability and even improved it. My construction business had grown significantly, partly because Joe Martinez had recommended me to other contractors impressed by my integrity during the family crisis. Word had spread that I'd chosen legal consequences over family manipulation, and that reputation for honesty had brought me steady work and reliable clients. "I have an announcement," Tyler said during our weekly family dinner. "I've been offered a paid internship with the state attorney general's office working on financial crimes cases." We all cheered and congratulated him. Tyler's experience with our parents' fraud had given him unique insights that prosecutors valued, and his academic performance had impressed his professors enough to recommend him for competitive positions. The internship supervisor said that family fraud cases are increasingly common and they need people who understand the emotional manipulation involved. Tyler continued. Apparently, my essay about personal experience with financial abuse was what got me the job. Emma raised her water glass in a toast. To Tyler, who's turning our family's worst experience into a career helping other people. To all of us, I added, for choosing truth over comfort and justice over family harmony. Margaret smiled warmly. Your grandfather would be so proud of how you've all handled this situation. He always said that real family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, even when the harm comes from within the family itself. As we finished dinner, Emma brought up something she'd been considering for months. Jason, I want to pay you back for the medical expenses you covered yourself during your appendicitis emergency, she said. I know Mom and Dad were supposed to help you, and I was so focused on wedding plans that I didn't even think about how unfair it was. You don't need to do that, I replied. I want to, Emma insisted. I have money saved from my job, and I realize now that helping family members during medical emergencies should be automatic, not conditional, on whether it fits someone's budget for luxury purchases. Her offer meant more than the money itself. It represented Emma's complete rejection of our parents' values and her commitment to building relationships based on genuine care rather than manipulation. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, I sat on my front porch thinking about the past year and how dramatically everything had changed. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Jason, this is Bradley. I heard about the court case resolution. I wanted to apologize for how I handled things with Emma. You were protecting your family, and I should have supported that instead of letting my parents' prejudices control my decisions. I hope you can forgive my cowardice. I showed the message to Emma when she called later that night. He sent me a similar text, she said. Apparently, the Thornton family's financial advisor got arrested for embezzling from client accounts, and Bradley finally understands what real financial crimes look like. Are you going to respond to him? I asked. I already did, Emma replied. I thanked him for the apology and told him I hope he's learned to value character over social status in future relationships. A year after my parents' sentencing, Tyler graduated from college with honors and a job offer from a federal agency investigating white-collar crimes. Emma had been promoted to program coordinator at her nonprofit and was dating a social worker who shared her commitment to helping vulnerable populations. Grandmother Margaret celebrated her 84th birthday, surrounded by friends from her financial protection workshops and family members who'd learned to recognize manipulation and stand up for themselves. My construction business had expanded enough to hire 2 employees, including a young man whose family had been victimized by financial fraud, similar to what my parents had done. Most surprisingly, my parents had gradually begun acknowledging their behavior and working to make genuine amends. The court-ordered therapy had forced them to confront their patterns of manipulation and entitlement, and they'd started taking responsibility for the damage they'd caused. Patricia sent me a letter 6 months after sentencing. Jason, I know that apologies can't undo the harm we caused you and the rest of the family. The therapy sessions have helped me understand how we justified stealing from people we claimed to love. I want you to know that I'm grateful you had the courage to stop us before we hurt more people. We were sick with greed and entitlement, and you saved us from ourselves, even though it cost you tremendously. David's apology came later and was more difficult for him, but equally sincere. Son, I spent years telling myself that providing for Emma's social advancement and our lifestyle was more important than basic honesty and respect for family members. I used manipulation and theft to avoid facing our own financial limitations. You showed more integrity at 28 than I've shown in my entire adult life. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now why you did what you did. The restitution payments continued steadily, and my parents had downsized to a modest apartment and taken jobs to meet their financial obligations. They attended family gatherings when invited, but no longer expected to control family decisions or finances. On the second anniversary of my appendicitis emergency, Tyler, Emma, Margaret, and I took a vacation together to celebrate our family's recovery and resilience. We'd learned that real family loyalty means protecting each other from harm, standing up for justice, even when it's difficult, and building relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. The most important lesson I learned was that protecting personal boundaries isn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. Family loyalty shouldn't require financial sacrifice or accepting abuse. True family members support each other during genuine emergencies rather than prioritizing luxury wants over basic needs. Standing up to manipulation, even from parents, preserves dignity and creates opportunities for authentic relationships built on respect rather than obligation. The courage to seek justice protects not only oneself, but other vulnerable family members who cannot defend themselves. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to stop enabling their harmful behavior, even when they hate you for it initially. Real love requires truth, accountability, and the willingness to endure temporary conflict for long-term healing. Our family emerged stronger, healthier, and more genuine after facing the truth about financial manipulation and choosing justice over false harmony. We learned that family bonds built on honesty and respect are more valuable than relationships maintained through fear, guilt, and obligation. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and doing what's right? Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the best outcomes, even when the path is painful. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Share this with anyone who might be facing similar situations, because sometimes we all need reminders that standing up for ourselves and others is worth the temporary discomfort. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find courage to protect yourself and the people you love when facing difficult family dynamics.